But the one thing with the pews, I have to say, I'm going to release the raw footage so everybody could see every pew. I think that's only fair because the West, although Reggie made the argument a while ago about West, I see why the church says it's West African Arabic because it does look like that script, but looking like don't make it. That's what it is. But who am I? I'm just saying.
Well, Garfield, what does the consensus say about that script? What does it say
about what the script on the
pews? On the pews, yes.
I don't know. I don't know if there's really a consensus. I think everybody that looks at it is because what we do is we look at it from our perspective, from the people that's made the claims.
Now, this is where you got me confused, Garfield. Because I thought you were saying, I thought you said on another channel that the documentary showed and proved that our people weren't illiterate when they came over, i.e., they could write.
Yeah. Of course.
Okay.
What's that?
So is that the scholarly consensus of the pews that it demonstrates that we can write or no?
I wouldn't know. I would have to know how many scholars.
Okay.
No, for real. I would have to know how many scholars to jump up and say the scholarly consensus. I'm not doing that with that. I don't know. The pews is, you see, for the white folks at the University of Cincinnati.
I respect that. That's real smart.
Garfield, you always appeal to that method.
Yes, I
do.
So
now you don't know.
I don't know if there's a consensus on the pews because
man.
Remember, hold on. That's an inside joke. But remember, the gentleman is basically saying University of Cincinnati is binding for a reason because it's been argued about by many people. We need to look at the consensus of all the people that have reviewed it, then draw a conclusion on what the consensus is. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know what the consensus is. Go
ahead, Moore. And I'm going to play a video because, Moore, I want to know from you. I don't want to break your concentration, but I want to know from you what you feel about the situation with Lisa, too. Because Garfield, hold on, let me play this because it's making Garfield making it sound like Vince Bantu and Lisa Fields. If you hem them up and ask them to show you specifically, show me where some Israelite or some black Jews came off the slave trade, like they don't have the source. Lord, listen to this.
And hold on, and more real quick. Also during that time, you had the trans-Saharan slave trade too.
Say that one more time, Dunamis.
Also during that time period, you had the trans-Saharan slave trade, but prior to the transatlantic.
No, agreed. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1 second.
I think one of the things is when I hear that question often, usually comes from people who are struggling with whether they're Hebrew Israelites in particular. And so I think to some extent we can acknowledge that there were Black Jews that came over on the transatlantic slave trade. I think what the extremists would say, all people that came across were Black Jews, and that's not the truth.
I agree with her more. Do you believe, and if you do you have evidence that we can present to Garfield right now? Do you have evidence that anyone getting off the slave ships in America, United States of America, down south, Charleston, Maryland, Mississippi, anywhere, or the West Indies, were Hebrews, were Israelites? Or you don't have any per se, but you just going by faith. If they were in West Africa, they had to make it over. A few of them at least had to make it over here. Or you're leaning towards the Bible and prophecy also, without any extra biblical evidence.
Oh no, I don't do the outside the extra biblical evidence. Like if you're going to talk about proving something, you got to get your hands on material culture with it, right? So one, me and the rest of the app do not believe that it was a large percentage of people coming off the slave ship that came that would have been Israelites, Hebrews, etc.
You don't believe? You said don't believe it was a large percentage.
No, sir. But we do believe there would have been some, etc. Whatnot, right? And some, just a real quick piece of evidence that Garfield brought to the table, right?
They're killing the whole awakening right there. They killing Deuteronomy right there.
Yeah, but like so, a real
first doctrine right there. Go ahead. I'm mute myself. You got the floor. Nobody else talk but more.
but Garfield brought a fantastic piece of evidence that actually proves that shows the percentages of what I'm talking about. Like, so he talked about the pews earlier, right? So when Garfield, Garfield, shout out to Garfield because he introduced the whole community to the concept of the documentary that was done that Ephraim Isaac and et cetera, whatnot, right?
Yes.
And if you go into that documentary, me and Garfield talked about this before. He stated that like one of the brilliant things about that documentary is that it showed that we were not illiterate coming off the slave ships and whatnot, right? And if you watch that documentary, like I've asked Garfield this before on air, like what was the languages that they actually pointed to on the pews and whatnot? So they point to a couple of Ge'ez letters or whatnot, but what they also point to is a shorthand version of the Tetragrammaton written with multiple yods. So it's not like yod hey wow hey in Hebrew letters, but it's a shorthand version of the Tetragrammaton written or the name of Yahweh written in short with the letter Y in multiplicity on the pews. So there. But however, you see a bunch of different African stuff in that church that's not Hebrew, right? And anything that could be Hebrew in the churches of extreme. Again, those yods on the pews, they appear on maybe 3-4 pews out of all the pews. You know what I'm saying? So that's not like you can't extrapolate this. Okay, this Bakongo Cosmo script that's got to be Israelite. This 9 patch that comes from northern Nigeria that's got to be Israelite, or et cetera, right? It would have there would have been a small group amongst the mix of everybody coming over, but you can't say it's the whole or whatnot, right? And Garfield, there is more evidence than that. I just wanted to throw that one out there.
The pews and just for the record, the pews and it's amazing, man. There's no Hebrew under the pews, man. I don't know why we keep playing this game. Come on, man. There's no Hebrew. There's opinions that it might be X, Y, and Z. It might be. If you look at what their words are. But when you speak to the scholars, and I could show letters right now with scholars who have dealt with the pews over and over and over, they said there is no Hebrew on that pews. It sounds good, but it's beautiful to hear my brother Orthodox Moore says this. But you know what's crazy? Mm-hmm. There was a community nearby mm-hmm. that they had a Jewish community nearby, which mm-hmm. would make sense. But if these people had access to Hebrew and they're writing on the pews or whatever, I don't see it. I think it's wishful thinking. And by the way, to the church that's there, they change their mind every day of the week, depending on how they're attracting tourists to the area. But there's no the closest thing is Arabic. There's no trust me. They have so many people that has come out and an expert, and when you look at it, just ask them to show you the Yod Wa. Do you have your slides with your Orthodox Moore to show us this? The Yod Wa, do you have it with you now, or are you not able to?
I'm sure I can. Hold on, give me 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So you are 100% correct in the fact there's no scholastic consensus that says that there's yods on that pew, but you would not like argue with the fact that the documentary you brought to the table, the Ephraim Isaac, etc., they concluded that there was the shorthand version of the Tetragrammaton on the pews. No. You do dispute that?
I say you said conclusion. No.
Yeah.
They threw it could have. They said it could have been this.
They were definitive in the okay.
No.
So I'm sorry. So more. So you don't.
No, that can easily be taken care of. But don't worry about that. Go ahead.
I myself have written articles, and in my new book on the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, I do mention also the strong ties between ancient Israel and Ethiopia. The Ethiopian church, unlike all other churches, it still adheres to the ancient Hebrew tradition. Historically, we know a large number of Africans were brought from West Africa as slaves. But we now also know that there were many Africans who were brought from the east side.
The year is 1859. A church has just been erected in Savannah, Georgia. Up in the balcony, there are many markings and symbols on the pews.
William Hodgson went around recording Africans writing in these Afro-Asiatic languages. Europeans have said that Africans had no civilization, but because now he was showing that in fact these Africans had civilization by writing, he said that he was no longer allowed to have contact with them. He was not becoming basically an asset for the abolitionists, but the folks who even lived with him in Savannah, so that it was going against their best interests.
There is now evidence to clearly show that some of the slaves came with skills of writing, which transcends the traditional models of illiteracy, albeit most were illiterate. In fact, most people from Europe and the West were illiterate in that time.
We tend to identify Jews with Europe, but actually the Jewish ties with Africa is much more fundamental, much more well known.
One thing we know for sure, they had brought the worship. There was the liturgical life of the church that was introduced even before the scripture themselves.
Historically, we know a large number of Africans were brought from West Africa as slaves. But we now also know that there were many Africans who were brought from the east side. We mentioned before Zanzibar, and even from Ethiopia. If you go to northern Ethiopia, you see that a large number of people say our ancestors, even the Christians, they say our ancestors were Jews. Ethiopia is a big country with 90 million people today. According to the recent census, 70% of the people are Christian and 25% Muslim, and then the 5% Jews and Hindus and others. However, even the large number of the people of the north believe they descend from the Jews. We tend to identify Jews with Europe, but actually the Jewish ties with Africa is much more fundamental, much more well known. I myself have written articles, and in my new book on the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, I do mention also the strong ties between ancient Israel and Ethiopia. We talk about the fact that the Ethiopian church, unlike all other churches, it still adheres to the ancient Hebrew tradition: circumcision, separation of clean and unclean foods, cleanliness. Even the churches are built like the temple. Ethiopia, not only preserved some lost Jewish literary works, but it also preserved the old Jewish tradition. Raymond Moni, the French scholar, has written a book in which, in fact, he talks about like Jewish settlements in Ghana. In those days, as you know, in North Africa and Spain, Jews and Muslims were in many ways very close. Sometimes there was conflict, but most of the time, even the Kingdom of North Africa and Spain, there was what we call the golden age of Islam. There was a lot of collaboration between Jews and Muslims. But in any case, the existence of Jews in Ghana is already well documented. Now that looks like a sheen, a Hebrew sheen.
Where? This one here.
The first one.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
First African Baptist Church was originally called Ethiopian Church of Jesus Christ. Ethiopians caught in the slave trade traveled down to Angola and ended up in America. Did they bring their ancient Judeo-Christian traditions along with their Afro-Asiatic writing scripts?
Ethiopic and Hebrew both originate from the same Proto-Semitic alphabet. And in shape and in form, many of them look alike. Ha, Sa, Ra, Ri.
So all these letters are Ethiopic?
Yeah, that would be Ethiopic. Yeah.
Okay.
This is Ha, this is Sa.
Yeah.
And this could be Na if it was straight like this.
There is now evidence to clearly show that some of the slaves came with skills of writing, which transcends the traditional models of illiteracy, albeit most were illiterate. In fact, most people from Europe and the West were illiterate in that time. What we have observed with the Ha-Sa, following very often those two Ethiopic letters, are the two small lines. Those two small lines are symbolic of the abbreviation for the name of the Most High, YHWH.
Of course, yeah. The tetragrammaton sometimes is shortened as Ya and or Yo. Of course, the letter Yod also in many Jewish interpretations often represented the Ten Commandments also. So Yoda has a symbolism of the weight of the law.
Seeing that we have the Ha, Sa symbols on the pews in Savannah, Georgia, followed by this abbreviated symbol for the tetragrammaton of the name of the Israelite deity YHWH, is in itself remarkable in the sense that this has to be the writing of an ancient heritage that managed to somehow survive chattel slavery and persist with a record of a connection of a scattered people from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia